Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jacob Royster, and it has come to my attention that many of you who use Spotify do not know its terms and conditions. As we all know, it is an essential part for signing up for their platform, and in order to right this wrong, I have it in front of me. We're going to go at it front to back. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section, because by the time we get to the end of this video, I should be a certified Spotify legal expert. Let's get going. Hello and welcome to the Spotify Terms and Conditions of Use. Terms. The terms you see below are important because they outline your legal rights on Spotify, explain the rights you give to us when you use Spotify, describe the rules everyone needs to follow when using Spotify, and contain a class action waiver and an agreement to resolve any disputes that may arise by arbitration. Please read these terms, our privacy policy, and any other terms referenced in this document carefully. We hope you're sitting comfortably and listening to some great music. Here we go. Now, be careful, alright? When you're listening to your great music, you can't use Spotify yet, alright? You need to get through the terms and conditions of service. Once we're done here, then you can use Spotify all you want, but I suggest a different music provider. Chapter 1, Introduction. Or Article 1. Thanks for choosing Spotify. Spotify determined by we, us, and our. Spotify provides personalized services with social and interactive features for streaming music and other content, as well as other products and services that may be developed from time to time. By signing up or otherwise using any of these Spotify services, including all associated features and functionalities, websites, and user interfaces, as well as all content and software applications associated with our services, collectively the Spotify service, or accessing any music, videos, or other content or material that is made available through the service, the content, you are entering into a binding contract with Spotify USA Incorporated. Your agreement with us includes these terms and any additional terms that you agree to as discussed in the entire argument section below, other than terms with any third parties, collectively the agreements. The agreements include terms regarding future changes to the agreements, export controls, automatic renewals, limitations of liability, privacy, waiver of class actions, and resolution of disputes by arbitration instead of in court. We'll get to that in a second. If you wish to review the terms of the agreements, the current effective version of the agreements can be found on Spotify's website. We're there. You acknowledge that you have read and understood the agreements, accept these agreements, and agree to be bound by them. If you don't agree with or cannot comply with the ingredients, then you may not use the Spotify service or access any content. If you disagree with anything in the Spotify terms and conditions of use, get off the site, get off the platform, uninstall the app, alright? Because Spotify just doesn't want you there. I'm not affiliated with Spotify, by the way. I feel like I should say that now. In order to use the Spotify service and access any content, you need to be 18 years or older, or be 13 years or older, and have your parents or guardians consent to the agreements. So if you are under the age of 18 and don't have your mom or dad in the room with you right now, go get them, okay? 2, have the power to enter a binding contract with us and not be barred from doing so under any applicable laws. And 3, reside in the United States, alright? Canadian viewers, European viewers, you're out of here. You also promise that any registration information that you submit to Spotify is true, accurate, and complete, and you agree to keep it that way at all times. Article 2, changes to the agreements. Occasionally, we may make changes to the agreements. When we make material changes to the agreements, we'll provide you with notice as appropriate under the circumstances, e.g. by displaying a prominent notice within the service or by sending you an email. In some cases, we will notify you in advance, and your continued use of the service after the changes have been made will constitute your acceptance of the changes. Please therefore make sure you read any such notice carefully. If you do not wish to continue using the service under the new version of the agreements, you may terminate your account by contacting us. If you received a trial or a paid subscription through a third party, you must cancel the applicable paid subscription through such third party. Article 3, enjoying Spotify. Here's some information about all the ways you can enjoy Spotify. Article 3.1, service options. You can find a description of our service options on our website, and we will explain which service options are available to you when you create a Spotify account. Certain options are provided to you free of charge. The Spotify service that does not require payment is currently referred to as the free service. Other options require payment before you can access them, the paid subscriptions. We may also offer special promotional plans, memberships, or services, including offerings of any third-party products and services in conjunction with or through the Spotify service. We are not responsible for the products and services provided by such third parties. We reserve the right to modify, terminate, or otherwise amend our offered subscription plans and promotional offerings at any time in accordance with these terms. The unlimited service may not be available to all users. We will explain which services are available to you when you are signing up for their services. If you cancel your subscription to the unlimited service, or if your subscription to the unlimited service is interrupted, for example, if you change your payment details, you may not be able to resubscribe for the unlimited service. Note that the unlimited service may be discontinued in the future, in which case you will no longer be charged for the service. If you have purchased or received a code, gift card, prepaid offer, or other offer provided or sold by or on behalf of Spotify for access to a paid subscription, simply marked as code, separate terms and conditions presented to you along with the code may also apply to your access to the service, and you agree to comply with any such terms and conditions. You may also purchase access to a paid subscription through a third party. In such cases, separate terms and conditions with such third party, in addition to the agreements, may apply to your access to the service. Article 3.2, trials. From time to time, we or others on our behalf may offer trials of paid subscriptions for a specified period without payment or at a reduced rate, a trial. Spotify may determine your eligibility for a trial and withdraw or modify a trial at any time without prior notice and with no liability to the extent permitted under applicable law. For some trials, will require you to provide your payment details to start the trial. By providing such details, you agree that we may automatically begin charging you for the paid subscription on the first day following the end of the trial on a recurring monthly basis or another interval that we disclose to you in advance. If you do not want this charge, you must cancel the applicable paid subscription before the end of the trial by clicking here if you signed up for the trial through Spotify, or if you received your trial through a third party, you must cancel the applicable paid subscription through the third party. Article 4, Payments and Cancellations. Article 4.1, Billing. You may purchase a paid subscription directly from Spotify or through a third party by either 1. Paying a subscription fee in advance on a monthly basis or some other recurring interval disclosed to you prior to your purchase, or 2. Prepayment giving you access to the Spotify service for a specific time period, or known as the prepaid period. Spotify may change the price for the paid subscriptions, including recurring subscription fees, the prepaid period for periods not paid, or codes from time to time, and will communicate any price changes to you in advance and, if applicable, how to accept those changes. Price changes will take effect at the start of the next subscription period following the date of the price change. Subject to applicable law, you accept the new price by continuing to use the Spotify service after the price change takes effect. If you do not agree with a price change, you have the right to reject the change by unsubscribing from the paid subscription prior to the price change going into effect. Article 4.2, Renewal and Cancellation. Unless your paid subscription has been purchased for a prepaid period, your payment to Spotify or the third party through which you purchased the paid subscription will automatically renew at the end of the applicable subscription period, unless you cancel your paid subscription before the end of the then current subscription period by clicking here if you purchased the paid subscription through Spotify, or if you purchased the paid subscription through a third party by canceling the paid subscription through such third party. The cancellation will take effect the day after the last day of the current subscription period, and you will be downgraded to the free service. We do not provide refunds or credits for any partial subscription periods. If you have purchased a paid subscription using a code, your subscription will automatically terminate at the end of the period stated in the code, or when there is an insufficient prepaid balance to pay for the service. If you have purchased your paid subscription through a third party, you must cancel directly with that third party. Article 5. Using our service. We're finally here. The Spotify service and the content are the property of Spotify or Spotify's licensors. We grant you limited, non-exclusive, revocable permission to make use of the Spotify service and limited, non-exclusive, revocable permission to make personal, non-commercial use of the content, collectively access. This access shall remain in effect until and unless terminated by you or Spotify. You promise and agree that you are using the Spotify service and content for your own personal, non-commercial use, and that you will not redistribute or transfer the Spotify service or the content. The Spotify software applications and the content are not sold or transferred to you, and Spotify and its licensors retain ownership of all copies of the Spotify software applications and content even after installation on your personal computers, mobile handsets, tablets, wearable devices, speakers, and/or other devices, hereby known to as devices. All Spotify trademarks, service marks, trade names, logos, domain names, and any other features of the Spotify brand, also known as the Spotify brand features, are the sole property of Spotify or its licensors. The agreements do not grant you any rights to use any Spotify brand features, whether for commercial or non-commercial use. You agree to abide by our user guidelines and to not use the Spotify service, the content, or any part thereof in any manner not expressly permitted by the agreements. Except for the rights expressly granted to you in the agreements, Spotify grants no right, title, or interest to you in the Spotify service or content. Third-party software, for example, open-source software libraries included in the Spotify service are made available to you under the relevant third-party software libraries license terms as published in the Help or Settings section of our desktop and mobile client and/or on our website. Article 6. Third-party applications and devices. The Spotify service is integrated with or may otherwise interact with third-party applications, websites, and services, hereby known to as third-party applications, and third-party devices to make the Spotify service available to you. These third-party applications and devices may have their own terms and conditions of use and privacy policies, and your use of these third-party applications and devices will be governed by and subject to such terms and conditions and privacy policies. You understand and agree that Spotify does not endorse and is not responsible or liable for the behavior, features, or content of any third-party application or device or for any transaction you may enter to with the provider of any such third-party applications and devices, nor does Spotify warrant the compatibility or continuing compatibility of the third-party applications and devices with the service. Article 7. User-generated content. Spotify users may post, upload, or otherwise contribute content to the service, which may include, for example, pictures, text, messages, information, playlist titles, descriptions, and compilations, and/or other types of content, user content. For the avoidance of doubt, user content includes any such content posted to the Spotify support community as well as any other part of the Spotify service. You promise that, with respect to any user content you post on Spotify, you own or have the right to post such user content, and to such user content or its use by Spotify as contemplated by the agreements does not violate the agreements or any other rights set forth within the user guidelines, applicable law, or intellectual property, publicity, personality, or other rights of others, or imply any affiliation with or endorsement of you or your user content by Spotify, or any artist, band, label, entity, or individual without express written consent from Spotify or such individual or entity. Spotify may, but has no obligation to monitor, review, or edit user content. I'm going to take a quick pause right here. That is a falsely placed comma. This is a grammatical error. In all cases, Spotify reserves the right to remove or disable access to any user content for any or no reason, including user content that in Spotify's sole discretion violates the agreements. I disagree with Spotify reserving the right to remove or disable access to any user content break for no reason. I don't know. That's just me. But if that's your thing, then not gonna. Spotify may take these actions without prior notification to you or any third party. Removal or disabling of access to user content shall be at our sole discretion, and we do not promise to remove or disable access to any specific user content. You are solely responsible for all user content that you post. Spotify is not responsible for user content, nor does it endorse any opinion contained in the user content. You agree that if anyone brings a claim against Spotify related to user content that you post, then to the extent permissible under local law, you will indemnify and hold Spotify harmless from and against all damages, losses, and expenses of any kind, including reasonable attorney fees and costs arising out of such claim. If someone sues you for user content, that's your problem. Article 8 rights that you grant us. In consideration for the rights granted to you under the agreements, you grant us the right: 1. To allow the Spotify service to use the processor, bandwidth, and storage hardware on your device in order to facilitate the operation of the service. 2. To provide advertising and other information to you. And 3. To allow our business partners to do the same. In any part of the Spotify service, the content you access, including its selection and placement, may be influenced by commercial considerations, including Spotify's agreements with third parties. Some content licensed by, provided to, created by, or otherwise made available by Spotify, for example, podcasts, may contain advertising as part of the content. The Spotify service makes such content available to you unmodified. If you provide feedback, ideas, or suggestions to Spotify in connection with the Spotify service or content, also known as feedback, you acknowledge that the feedback is not confidential, and you authorize Spotify to use that feedback without restriction and without payment to you. Feedback is considered a type of user content. You grant Spotify a non-exclusive, transferable, sub-licensable, royalty-free, perpetual, irrevocable, fully paid, worldwide license to use, reproduce, make available to the public, e.g. perform or display, publish, translate, modify, create derivative works from, and distribute any of your user content in connection with the service through any medium, whether alone or in combination with other content or materials, in any manner and by any means, method, or technology, whether now known or hereafter created. Aside from the rights specifically granted herein, you retain ownership of all rights, including intellectual property rights in the user content, where applicable and permitted under applicable law. You also agree to waive and not enforce any moral rights or equivalent rights, such as your right to be identified as the author of any user content, including feedback, and your right to object to derogatory treatment of such user content. Article 9, User Guidelines. As if that wasn't already the user guidelines. Spotify respects intellectual property rights and expects you to do the same. We've established a few ground rules for you to follow when using the service to make sure Spotify stays enjoyable for everyone. You must follow these rules and should encourage other users to do the same. The following is not permitted for any reason whatsoever. Number 1. Copying, redistributing, reproducing, ripping, recording, transferring, performing, or displaying to the public, broadcasting, or making available to the public any part of the Spotify service or the content, or otherwise making any use of the Spotify service or the content which is not expressly permitted under the agreements or applicable law, or which otherwise infringes the intellectual property rights such as copyright, or the Spotify service or the content in any part of it. I do have a question. Does the user content that a user posts applicable to this law? Because if someone cannot perform a song that they've made and they own and they've now published to Spotify, then it's just a problem if they can't perform it themselves. Number 2, using the Spotify service to import or copy any local files that you do not have the legal right to import or copy in this way. Number 3, transferring copies of cached content from an authorized device to any other device via any means. Number 4, reverse engineering, decompiling, disassembling, modifying, or creating derivative works of the Spotify service content or any part thereof except to the extent permitted by applicable law. Number 5, circumventing any technology used by Spotify, its licensors, or any third party to protect the content or the service. Number 6, selling, renting, sublicensing, or leasing any part of the Spotify service, the content. Number 7, circumventing any territorial restrictions applied by Spotify or its licensors. Number 8, artificially increasing play counts, follow counts, or otherwise manipulating the service by 1, using any bot, script, or other automated process, 2, providing or accepting any form of compensation, financial or otherwise, or 3, any other means. Number 9, removing or altering any content, trademark, or other intellectual property notices contained on the by the content or the service or provided through the service, including for the purpose of disguising or changing any indications of the ownership or the source of any content. Number 10, circumventing or blocking advertisements in the Spotify service or creating or distributing tools designed to block advertisements in the Spotify service. Number 11, providing your password to any other person or using any other person's username and password. Number 12, crawling the Spotify service or otherwise using any automated means, including bots, scrapers, and spiders to view, access, or collect information from Spotify or the Spotify service. Number 13, selling a user account or playlist or otherwise accepting or offering to accept any compensation, financial or otherwise, to influence the name of an account or playlist or the content included on an account or playlist. Or number 14, artificially promoting content by automated means or otherwise. Please respect Spotify, the owners of the content, and other users of the Spotify service. Don't engage in any activity, post any user content, or register and/or use a username, which includes material that Number 15 is offensive, abusive, defamatory, pornographic, threatening, or obscene. Number 16 is illegal or intended to promote or commit an illegal act of any kind, including violations of intellectual property rights, privacy rights, or proprietary rights of Spotify or a third party. Number 17 includes your password or purposely includes any other user's password or purposely includes the personal data of third parties or is intended to solicit such personal data. Number 18 includes malicious content such as malware, Trojan horses, or viruses, or otherwise interferes with any user's access to the service. Number 19 is intended to or does harass or bully other users. Number 20 impersonates or misrepresents your affiliation with another user, person, or entity, or is otherwise fraudulent, false, deceptive, or misleading. Number 21 involves the transmission of unsolicited mass mailings or other forms of spam, junk mail, chain letters, or similar. Number 22 involves commercial or sales activities such as advertising, promotions, contests, sweepstakes, or pyramid schemes that are not expressly authorized by Spotify. Number 23 links to, references, or otherwise promotes commercial products or services except as expressly authorized by Spotify. Number 24 interferes with or in any way disrupts the Spotify service, tampers with, breaches, or attempts to probe, scan, or test for vulnerabilities in the service or Spotify's computer systems, network, usage rules, or any of Spotify's security components, authentication methods, or for any other protection measures applicable to the service, the content, or any part thereof. Or number 25, conflicts with the agreements as determined by Spotify. You acknowledge and agree that posting any user content that violates these user guidelines or that Spotify may reasonably believe violates these user guidelines may result in immediate termination or suspension of your Spotify account. You also agree that Spotify may reclaim your username for any reason. Please be thoughtful about how you use the Spotify service and what you share. Spotify service includes social and interactive features, including the ability to post user content, share content, and make certain information about you public. Remember that shared or publicly available information may be used and reshared by other users on Spotify or across the web, so please use Spotify carefully and be mindful of your account settings. Spotify has no responsibility for your choices to post material in the service. Your password protects your user account, and you are solely responsible for keeping your password confidential and secure. You understand that you are responsible for all use, including any unauthorized use of your username and password on the service. If your username or password is lost or stolen, or if you believe there has been unauthorized access to your account by a third party, you must notify us immediately and change your password as soon as possible. Article 10. Infringement and reporting user content. Spotify respects the rights of intellectual property owners. If you believe that any content infringes your intellectual property rights or other rights, see Spotify's copyright policy if Spotify is notified by a copyright holder using the forms provided by Spotify that any content infringes a copyright. Spotify may, in its sole discretion, remove such content from the service or take other steps that Spotify deems appropriate, without prior notification to the user or other party who supplied or posted that content. If such user or other party believes the content is not infringing, he or she may in certain circumstances submit a counter notification to Spotify with a request to restore the moved content, which Spotify may or may not honor in Spotify's sole discretion. If you believe that any content does not comply with the user guidelines, please fill out our notice form. Article 11. Service limitations and modifications. Spotify will make reasonable efforts to keep the Spotify service operational. However, certain technical difficulties, maintenance or testing, or updates required to reflect changes in relevant laws and regulatory requirements may from time to time result in temporary interruptions. Spotify reserves the right periodically and at any time to modify or discontinue temporarily or permanently functions and features of the Spotify service with advance notice as possible, all without liability to you except where prohibited by law for any interruption, modification, or discontinuation of the Spotify service or any function or feature thereof. Notwithstanding the foregoing, if you have prepaid fees to Spotify for paid subscriptions that Spotify permanently discontinues prior to the end of the prepaid period, defined in the Payments and Cancellations section, Spotify will refund you the prepaid fees for the prepaid period after such discontinuation. You understand, agree, and accept that Spotify will make reasonable efforts, although it has no obligation to maintain, support, upgrade, or update the service, or to provide all or any specific content through the service. Spotify and/or the owners of any content may from time to time remove any such content without notice. This section will be enforced to the extent permissible by applicable law. Article 12. Brand accounts. If you establish a Spotify account on behalf of a company, organization, entity, or brand, and such account a brand account, the terms you and your, as used throughout the agreements, apply to both you and the brand. If you create a brand account, you represent and warrant that you are authorized to grant all permissions and licenses provided in the agreements and to bind the brand to the agreements. A brand may follow users and create and share playlists, provided that the brand does not take any action that implies an endorsement or commercial relationship between the brand and the followed user, artist, songwriter, or any other person unless the brand has independently obtained the rights to imply such an endorsement. In addition, brands must be transparent to our users without disclosing any endorsements or consideration provided to artists, songwriters, users, or any other party, and must comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and codes of practice when engaging in the foregoing practices. Article 13. Spotify Support Community. The Spotify Support Community is a place for discussions and exchange of information, tips, and other materials related to the Spotify service. By using the Spotify Support Community, you agree to the community terms. Article 14, Customer Support. For customer support with account-related and payment-related questions, also known as customer support queries, please submit a ticket to our customer service department using the customer service contact form in the About Us section of our website. We will use reasonable endeavors to respond to all customer support queries within a reasonable time frame, but we make no promises that any customer support queries will be responded to within any particular time frame, and or that we will be able to answer any such queries. All right, so if they don't have the answer, you're doomed. All right, you're just gonna sit there in the ether until they decide that someone might have the answer. Article 15, Export Control. Spotify's products may be subject to U.S. export and re-export control laws and regulations or similar laws applicable in other jurisdictions, including the Export Administration's regulations, or also known as EAR, maintained by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Trade, and Economic Sanctions, maintained by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, also known as the OFAC, and the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, also known as ITAR, maintained by the Department of State. You warrant that you are 1. Not located in any country to which the United States has embargoed goods or has otherwise applied any economic sanctions, and 2. Not a denied party as specified in any applicable export or re-export laws or regulations or similar laws applicable in other jurisdictions. I'm sorry. I guess countries that the United States puts sanctions on are just temporarily not allowed to use Spotify. So I guess North Korea has no music. I mean, I don't mean to get political, and I guess North Korea didn't have any music in the first place, but it just seems kind of weird to do. Like, I don't want to call it a power play. I don't really know what to call it. It's just like, you sanctioned, no more Spotify. All right, you're done. But this is only for people who live in the United States and are applying to Spotify USA Incorporated. So I don't know why they would put this here unless they were already knowledgeable that people outside of the United States were going to use Spotify. Maybe I'm reading it wrong and Spotify extends internationally, but I don't know. And 2, not a denied party is specified in any explicable export or re-export laws. Did I already read this? You agree to comply with all applicable. You agree to comply with all applicable export and re-export control laws and regulations, including the EAR, trade and economic sanctions maintained by OFAC and the ITAR. Specifically, you agree that you shall not, directly or indirectly, sell, export, re-export, transfer, divert, or otherwise dispose of any products, software, or technology, including products derived from or based on such technology, received from Spotify under the agreements to any destination, entity, or person prohibited by any applicable laws or regulations of the United States or any other jurisdiction without obtaining prior authorization from the competent government authorities as required by those laws and regulations. I don't know. But when they say competent government authorities, I really encourage them to find one. Article 16, Term and Termination. The agreements will continue to apply to you until terminated by either you or Spotify. However, you acknowledge and agree that the perpetual license granted to you in relation to user content, including feedback, is irrevocable and will therefore continue after expiry or termination of any of the agreements for any reason. Spotify may terminate the agreements or suspend your access to the Spotify service at any time, including in the event of your actual or suspected unauthorized use of the Spotify service and/or content, or non-compliance with the agreements if we withdraw services and/or content, in which case we shall provide you with reasonable notice in advance of doing so. If you or Spotify terminate the agreements, or if Spotify suspends your access to the Spotify service, you agree that Spotify will have no liability or responsibility to you, and Spotify will not refund any amounts that you have already paid to the fullest extent permitted under applicable law. You may terminate the agreements at any time. To learn how to terminate your Spotify account, please contact the customer service contact form, which is available on our About Us page. This section will be enforced to the extent permissible by applicable law. Sections 7, 8, 9, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 herein, as well as any other sections of the agreements that, either explicitly or by nature, must remain in effect even after termination of the agreements, shall survive termination. However, sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 25 are up for grabs, alright? So whatever we just read in that list, just don't think about it if Spotify goes under. Article 17, Warranty Disclaimer, and this is all in caps lock, so I don't know if I should get louder for... You understand and agree that the Spotify service is provided as is and as available, without express or implied warranty or condition of any kind. Spotify and all owners of the content make no representations and disclaim any warranties or conditions of satisfactory quality, merchantability, fitness for a particular purpose, or non-infringement. Neither Spotify nor any owner of content warrants that the Spotify service is free of malware or other harmful components. In addition, Spotify makes no representation, nor does it warrant, endorse, guarantee, or assume responsibility for any third-party applications or the content thereof, user content devices, or any product or service advertised, promoted, or offered by a third party on or through the Spotify service or any hyperlinked website, or featured in any banner or other advertising, and Spotify is not responsible or liable for any transaction between you and third-party providers of the foregoing. No advice or information, whether oral or in writing, obtained by you from Spotify shall create any warranty on behalf of Spotify. While using the Spotify service, you may have access to explicit content filtering features, but use of these features may still result in some explicit content being served, and you should not rely on such features to filter all explicit content. This section applies to the fullest extent permitted by applicable law. This section does not affect your statutory rights as a consumer. Well, I'm glad they told you. I mean, you couldn't even fill in the blanks for yourself, alright? If you asked yourself, hey, does Article 17 of the Spotify Terms and Conditions of Use, does that violate my statutory rights as a consumer, right? Boom, right here, alright? You need not ask. Article 18, Limitation and Time for Filing. You agree that your sole and exclusive remedy for any problems or dissatisfaction with the Spotify service is to uninstall any Spotify software and to stop using the Spotify service. You agree that Spotify has no obligation or liability arising from or related to third-party applications or the content thereof made available through or in connection with the Spotify service, and while your relationship with such third-party applications may be governed by separate agreements with such third parties, your sole and exclusive remedy is with respect to Spotify for any problems or dissatisfaction with third-party applications or the content thereof is to uninstall and or stop using any such third-party applications. In no event will Spotify, its officers, shareholders, employees, agents, directors, subsidiaries, affiliates, successors, assigned suppliers, or licenses be liable for 1. Any indirect, special, incidental, punitive, exemplary, or consequential damages. 2. Any loss of use, data, business, or profits, whether direct or indirect, in all cases arising out of the use or inability to use the Spotify service, devices, third-party applications, or third-party application content, regardless of legal theory, without regard to whether Spotify has been warned of the possibility of those damages, and even if a remedy fails of its essential purpose. Or 3. Aggregate liability for all claims relating to the Spotify service, third-party applications, or third-party application content more than the amounts paid by you to Spotify during the prior 12 months in question. Nothing in the agreements removes or limits Spotify's ability for fraud, fraudulent misrepresentation, death, or personal injury caused by its negligence, and, if required by applicable law, gross negligence. How would Spotify be liable for someone's death? Like, they got their earbuds in, right? They're listening to 21 Pilots. I don't know what's cool now. And then all of a sudden they're like walking straight towards a cliff and just I don't mean to make fun of anyone that has walked off a cliff and died. I apologize. But I guess that's the only reason. And I got a second question that shows up in Article 18. Say there is a brand or brand account that makes something on Spotify, and something happens where Spotify believes that brand account violates their terms of service, the terms and conditions of use. However, it is found that they did nothing wrong afterwards, and their account is restored. Do the brand accounts still count as users? Are the brand accounts compensated at all for the lost money on Spotify's behalf? Or is Spotify just not liable for those damages at all? It seems like regardless of legal theory, without regard to whether Spotify has been warned of the possibility of those damages, and even if a remedy fails of its essential purpose, it kind of sounds like Spotify is not responsible for Spotify. That's what the terms and conditions of use are saying in Article 18. So yeah, we were on gross negligence. Let's just keep going. You agree that any claim against Spotify must be commenced by filing a demand for arbitration under Section 24.2.1 or filing an individual action under Section 24.2.2 within 1 year after the date the party asserting the claim first knows or reasonably should know of the act, omission, or default giving rise to the claim, and there shall be no right to any remedy for any claim not asserted within that time period. This section applies to the fullest extent permitted by applicable law. Alright, I need a drink of water after that. How you doing? You still comfy? You still sitting there? Article 19. Third-party rights. You acknowledge and agree that the owners of the content and certain distributors, such as App Store providers, are intended beneficiaries of the agreements and have the right to enforce the agreements directly against you. Other than is set out in this section, the agreements are not intended to grant rights to anyone except you and Spotify, and in no event shall the agreements create any third-party beneficiary rights. Furthermore, the rights to terminate, rescind, or agree to any variation, waiver, or settlement of the agreements are not subject to the consent of any other person. If you have downloaded the app from the Apple Incorporated, also known as Apple App Store, and if you are using the app on an iOS device, you acknowledge that you have read, understood, and agree to the following notice regarding Apple. This agreement is between you and Spotify only, not with Apple, and Apple is not responsible for the service and the content thereof, just so you know. Apple has no obligation whatsoever to furnish any maintenance and support services with respect to the service. In the event of any failure of the service to conform to any applicable warranty, then you may notify Apple, and Apple will refund any applicable purchase price for the app to you. And to the maximum extent permitted by applicable law, Apple has no other warranty obligation whatsoever with respect to the service. So is Apple responsible for Spotify? Is that what I'm hearing? I don't know who owns what. Apple is not responsible for addressing any claims by you or any third party relating to the service or your possession and/or use of the service, including 1. Product liability claims, 2. Any claim that the service fails to conform to any applicable legal or regulatory requirement, and 3. Claims arising under consumer protection or similar legislation. Apple is not responsible for the investigation, defense, settlement, and discharge of any third-party claim that the service and/or your possession and use of the app infringe that third party's intellectual property rights. You agree to comply with any applicable third-party terms when using the service. Apple and Apple subsidiaries are third-party beneficiaries of this agreement, and upon your acceptance of this agreement, Apple will have the right and will be deemed to have accepted the right to enforce this agreement against you as a third-party beneficiary of this agreement. You hereby represent and warrant that 1. You are not located in a country that is subject to a U.S. government embargo or that has been designated by the U.S. government as a terrorist-supporting country, and 2. You are not listed on any U.S. government list of prohibited or restricted parties. What is defined as a terrorist-supporting country? Right? I feel like that's really subjective, and I feel like they should have expanded more on that, right? Like, all of what they've been talking about is pretty much a given. It's pretty much what you'd find in any legal document. But this right here, a terrorist supporting country, like, is there a list of, let's find out. List of terrorist supporting countries. Oh, I guess there is. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Iran, Sudan, and Syria. Alright. Well, there we go. There we go. Anyone from those 4 countries, you're out of the deal. Alright, Spotify USA Incorporated is not selling to you. Go away. I apologize, but however, you can keep watching this video to the end if you'd like. Article 20, entire agreement. Other than as stated in this section or as explicitly agreed upon in writing between you and Spotify, the agreements will constitute all the terms and conditions agreed upon between you and Spotify and supersede any prior agreements in relation to the subject matter of these agreements, whether written or oral. Please note, however, that certain aspects of your use to the Spotify service may be governed by additional agreements. That can include, for example, access to the Spotify service as a result of a gift card free or discounted trials or together with other services. When you are presented with an offer for such aspects of your use, you will be presented with any related additional agreement, and you may have an opportunity to agree to additional terms. Some of those additional terms are listed on Spotify's website, which we're on. You could have just put them right here. But to the extent that there is any irreconcilable, I know it's reconcilable, but
irreconcilable.
To the extent that there is any irreconcilable conflict between any additional terms in these terms, the additional terms shall prevail. Article 21, severability, waiver, and interpretation. Unless as otherwise stated in the agreements, should any provision of the agreement be held invalid or unenforceable for any reason or to any extent, such invalidity or enforceability shall not in any manner affect or render invalid or unenforceable the remaining provisions of the agreements, and the application of that provision shall be enforced to the extent permitted by law. Any failure by Spotify or any third-party beneficiary to enforce the agreements or any provision thereof shall not waive Spotify's or the applicable third-party beneficiary's right to do so. As used in these terms, the words include and including and variations thereof will be deemed to be followed by the words without limitation. Okay. Article 22, Assignment. Spotify may assign the agreements and any of its rights under the agreements in whole or in part, and Spotify may delegate any of its obligations under the agreements. You may not assign the agreements, or in whole or in part, nor transfer or sublicense your rights under the agreements to any third party. Okay? Article 23, Indemnification. Indemnification. You agree to indemnify and hold Spotify harmless from and against all damages, losses, and expenses of any kind, including reasonable attorney fees and costs arising out of or related to 1. Your breach of the agreements or any one of them. 2. Any user content you post or otherwise contribute. 3. Any activity in which you engage on or through the Spotify service. And 4. Your violation of any law or the rights of a third party. I apologize. It's been 2 years since I've been in an English classroom. Article 24, Choice of Law, Mandatory Arbitration, and Venue. 24.1, Governing Law and Jurisdiction. The agreements and any non-contractual disputes or claims arising out or in connection with them are subject to the laws of the State of California, United States of America, without regard to choice or conflicts of law principles. However, you and Spotify agree to the jurisdiction of the Northern District of California to resolve any dispute, claim, or controversy that relates to or arises in connection with the agreements, and any non-contractual disputes or claims relating to or arising in connection with them, and is not subject to mandatory arbitration under Section 24.2.1. Article 24.2, Arbitration Agreement. This arbitration agreement applies only to users in the United States. Didn't they just say people outside of the... No, well, fuck it. Article 24.2.1, Dispute Resolution and Arbitration. You and Spotify agree that any dispute, claim, or controversy between you and Spotify arising in connection with or relating in any way to those agreements or to your relationship with Spotify as a user of the service, whether based in contract, tort, statute, fraud, misrepresentation, or any other legal theory, and whether the claims arise during or after the termination of the agreements will be determined by mandatory binding individual, not class, arbitration. You and Spotify further agree that the arbitrator shall have the exclusive power to rule on his or her own jurisdiction, including any objections with respect to the existence, scope, or validity of the arbitration agreement or to the arbitrability of any claim or counterclaim. Arbitration is more informal than a lawsuit in court. There is no judge or jury in arbitration, and court review of an arbitration award is limited. There may be more limited discovery than in court. The arbitrator must follow this agreement and can award the same damages and relief as a court, including attorney fees, except that the arbitrator may not reward any relief, including declaratory or injunctive relief, benefiting anyone but the parties to the arbitration. This arbitration provision will survive termination of the agreements. I like how they put that one there. All right, in case Spotify pulls apart, you can't even arbitrate. Can't go through arbitration with them, I should say. Article 24.2.2, which for some reason 24.2.1 and 24.2.4 are in different font sizes than 24.2.3 and 24.2.2. That angers me greatly, and I wish Spotify would fix that. This is very unprofessional. I feel offended. Exceptions. Notwithstanding the clause above, 24.2.1, in case you forgot how to count, you and Spotify both agree that nothing in this arbitration agreement will be deemed to waive, preclude, or otherwise limit either of your rights at any time to 1. Bring an individual action in a U.S. small claims court, or 2. Bring an individual action seeking only temporary or preliminary individualized injunctive relief in a court of law. I just skipped that yawn, by the way. You're welcome. Pending a final ruling from the arbitrator. In addition, this arbitration agreement doesn't stop you or us from bringing issues to the attention of federal, state, or local agencies. Such agencies can, if the law allows, seek relief against us on your behalf or vice versa. So federal, state, and local agencies can just step over the Spotify rules. That's good to know. Article 24.2.3. No class or representative proceedings class action waiver. You and You and Spotify agree that each may bring claims against the other only in your or its individual capacity, and not as a plaintiff or class member in any purported class or representative action. Unless both you and Spotify agree, no arbitrator or judge may consolidate more than one person's claim for any form of representative or individual to the extent necessary to provide relief warranted. They must be set for arbitration because it's in small text. Those are the only the consumer arbitration known as enforce the rules arbitration. I agree that the Federal Arbitration Act applies and governs the interpretation and enforcement of this provision, despite the choice of law provision above. The rules, as well as instructions on how to file an arbitration proceeding with the appear at adr.org, or you may call the at 1-800-778-7879. Spotify can also help put you in touch with the Any arbitration hearings will take place in the county or parish of your billing address, provided that if the claim is for $25,000 or less, you may choose whether the arbitration will be conducted 1. Solely on the basis of documents submitted to the arbitrator, 2. Through a non-appearance-based telephonic hearing, or 3. By an in-person hearing as established by the rules in the county or parish of your billing address. If you choose to file an arbitration proceeding and you are required to pay a filing fee, Spotify will reimburse you for that filing fee, unless your claim is for greater than $10,000, in which case you will be responsible for the filing fee, right? You got money to pay them. Spotify will pay any other arbitration fees, including your share of arbitrator compensation, unless otherwise required by rules or court order. Regardless of the manner in which the arbitration is conducted, the arbitrator shall issue a reasoned written discussion sufficient to explain the essential findings and conclusions on which the decision and award, if any, are based. The arbitrator may make rulings and resolve disputes as to the payment and reimbursement of fees or expenses at any time during the proceeding and upon request from either party made within 14 days of the arbitrator's ruling on the merits. All right, you got 2 weeks. Article 24.2.5, also in small text. Notice. Process. A party who intends to seek arbitration must first send a written notice of the dispute to the other by certified mail, Federal Express, UPS, or Express Mail. Signature required. No FedEx. All right, we don't handle that. Or in the event that we do not have a physical address on file for you, by electronic mail, also known as a notice. Spotify's address for notice is Spotify USA Incorporated, Attention, General Counsel, 4 World Trade Center, 150 Greenwich Street, 62nd floor, New York, New York, 10,007 USA. I'm not going to block that address because that's a corporate place. The notice must 1. Describe the nature and basis of the claim of dispute, and 2. Set forth the specific relief sought, also known as demand. We agree to use good faith efforts to resolve the claim directly, but if we do not reach an agreement to do so within 30 days after the notice was received, you or Spotify may commence an arbitration proceeding. During the arbitration, the amount of any settlement offer made by you or Spotify shall not be disclosed to the arbitrator until after the arbitrator makes a final decision or an award, if any. In the event our dispute is finally resolved through arbitration in your favor and the arbitrator issues you an award that is greater than the value of Spotify's last written settlement offer, then Spotify will instead pay you either the amount of the award or $1,000, whichever is greater. All documents and information disclosed in the course of the arbitration shall be kept strictly confidential by the recipient and shall not be used by the recipient for any purpose other than for purposes of the arbitration or the enforcement of the arbitrator's decision. An award shall not be disclosed except in confidence to persons who have a need to know for such purposes or is required by applicable law. Now, it's going to be pretty hard for Spotify to pay you the amount of the award or $1,000, since the past 23 articles have been about how Spotify is barely, if at all, responsible for Spotify, except in the case of user content that they wouldn't respond to. But in any case, if something happens to user content, then Spotify is not held liable. So it's just there to be there. All right, I doubt anyone will get $1,000 from Spotify or even manage to make it to arbitration with Spotify's legal team. All documents and information disclosed in the course of the arbitration shall be kept strictly confidential by the recipient and shall not be used by the recipient for any purpose other than for purposes of the arbitration or the enforcement of the arbitrator's decision, and award shall not be disclosed except in confidence to persons who have a need to know for such purposes or as required by applicable law. So if you win a lawsuit with Spotify, which you won't, you can't tell anyone how much you won. So don't do that. Article 24.2.6, enforceability, which there is barely any. If this arbitration agreement is invalidated in whole or in part, the parties agree that the exclusive jurisdiction and venue described in section 24.1, if you haven't noticed, 24.1 is up here. Oh, fuck. Okay. For context, I've balanced my microphone on a tambourine, so I didn't have another platform. I'm sorry. The parties agree that the exclusive jurisdiction and venue described in section 24.1 shall govern any claim in court arising out of or related to the agreements. Article 25, the final one. Contact us. If you have any questions concerning the Spotify service or the agreements, please contact Spotify customer service by visiting the About Us section of our website. If you are a California resident, you may have the agreements mailed to you electronically by sending a letter to Spotify USA Incorporated, attention to the General Counsel, 4 World Trade Center, 150 Greenwich Street, 62nd floor, New York, 10007, USA, with your email address and a request for the agreements. In addition, under California Civil Code Section 1789.3, you may contact the Complaint Assistance Unit of the Division of Consumer Services of the California Department of Consumer Affairs in writing at 1625 North Market Boulevard, Suite S202, Sacramento, California, 95834. That's 95834L by telephone at 1-800-952-5210 in order to resolve a complaint regarding the service or to receive further information regarding the use of the service. Thank you for reading our terms. We hope you enjoy Spotify. Contracting entity, Spotify USA Incorporated. You know the address, and I hope you know the country they're located in. So yeah, that is everything. Now, I am happy to tell you that you are now eligible to use Spotify. I'm sure no one, without their parents' permission, would use Spotify under the age of 18, but once you ask your mom and dad, if you called them into the room at the beginning of the video, just ask them for the thumbs up, the thumbs down, and if you are 18, go at it. Get out there, get spotting, get those spotta likes. I don't know. That's all I had. Goodbye.